We'll go to the Embiid lineups, Tyrese Maxey off the floor. And this is where it got a little bit interesting because I kept one in there.
Derek and I were very close.
I kept one in there for a specific reason, but let's go to yours first. Embiid, Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre, Eric Gordon. You went with Derek. You went with Reggie Jackson over Kyle Lowry. Kyle, you went with Lowry over Jackson. Derek, start with you. Why Jackson over Lowry?
I just think Jackson has a little more in terms of pick and roll playmaking. So pairing that with Embiid when Max is off the floor, that's sort of my justification for that. I also think it's probably a little bit easier to play Kyle off ball in lineups with Tyrese. So I thought that would be a more natural fit on that group. And then, like I said, with Martin, I just want him on the floor to see whether or not that catch and shoot proficiency that he's shown over the past can be ramped up on higher volume.
None of us had KJ Martin in that grouping there.
Some of that on my wall. So we'll get to my part on Ricky and KJ in a little bit, but part of that is wish casting, I would say, like hoping that they'll play Ricky more than expecting. I think KJ, if I had to guess based on what we saw last year, KJ will be given the opportunity first.
Yes.
I also sort of just looked at like, all right, I'm going to say that Nick has like a 9 to 10 man regular rotation in the regular season. I'm trying to guess the regular rotation rather than going 11, 12, 13 deep.
Yep, absolutely. So, Kyle, your part, Lowry in front of Jackson. We already talked about the KJ Martin piece. Why do you lean more in that direction?
I mean, I just think
Nick Nurse, baby.
Nick Nurse started him last year, right? Like this is, I mean,
that was more because he damn near had to.
It's
he
also because he loves the band.
But he
That
loves
too.
him. And I think part of the reason they were able to sell Lowry on coming here is like, hey, Nick Nurse is going to play you. It's part of the political side of things. Once again, now he also got a little bit of extra money last year, which is it's not a non-thing. But so in those, I wanted to put Lowry and Gordon out there, assuming that they're going to play. If they're going to play next to one another at any point, I want them on the floor with Joel. Like just Joel, figure it out. If Joel's on the floor in the regular season, he's going to be able to buoy these minutes. He's got a couple of athletic defenders in Martin and Oubre. Then you got some floor spacing, some veteran savvy between the other two. Really what I was trying to do is just like give Tyrese Paul, give Tyrese like a second star and some other guys around him who can help. Joel can basically figure out anything. So I don't know if any of us are factoring Jared McCain into the rotation. I feel like my expectation is no right now. But if you were going to put him in, I think it has to be in these minutes with Joel to have him behind him as like the world-saving defensive force. But yeah, I will say as I looked at it, I don't love the combinations as much as I hoped. Because again, they just keep signing a bunch of 6'1" and 6'2" guys. There are only so many wings that you can play when you're like a third of your roster is guards.
Well, that was part of my issue. I'm like, all right, where am I going to put Kyle on this? I actually don't have Kyle on this at all. And part of that reason is there's just so many of those types where I want size on the perimeter.
Well, so I don't have Reggie for basically the same reason. I don't think you can. It also is not conducive to either of their success to be like, Kyle, you come in for 4 minutes with Joel, then you're off. Reggie, you play 4 minutes with Andre Drummond, 4 to 6 minutes with Andre, and then they both play like 8 to 12 minutes a game. Like, I don't think that's any way to have a productive spell as a backup point guard. That's a tough job base level, let alone if you're doing it in these like really compressed shifts.
There are enough wings on this roster right now where when they're healthy, you should not see Tyrese Maxey and Kyle Lowry. You should not see Tyrese Maxey and Reggie on the floor at the same time. But I'm a little worried that these are players with enough stature and, like Kyle mentioned earlier, enough expectation that you're going to see some suboptimal lineups because of that.
So knowing what Nick Nurse did a season ago where Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris came off the floor at the same time, Joel Embiid, those minutes, as you guys put in your next 5 with the Embiid minutes, I recognize that. I considered that, but I also looked at it. I went with Lowry over Jackson, and I went with George number 1 because of the extra ball handling on the floor. staying for a few more minutes, not necessarily he's going to be out there for the entire time because he is going to play a majority of the time there with Tyrese Maxey. But I went with George because of the ball handling aspect of it with Lowry. Yes, Gordon can do some things, but I think I would prefer more to have Paul George with the ball in his hands with Lowry out there because sometimes Lowry's going to play off the ball too, where they're not looking for him to score, but we're looking at him doing some other different things that he does out there on the floor. A lot of times we can't even predict, and that's not even shown on the stat sheet. That's us watching and talking about it later and all of that. So I went with George there. We all agreed on the Gordon piece and the Embiid part. And the only reason I went with Ricky over Kelly Oubre is because I thought that Kelly's going to come off the floor at some point. Number one, I'm not even factoring this in, but this is, it's funny. He's going to get in foul trouble sometimes, but he's going to come off the floor, and that's just a must. But it was more of, as we just talked about KJ Martin, wish casting on the Ricky growth, that you're still looking for that wing out there that may do some fun things out there on the floor that's going to wreak some havoc with the 10 to 15 minutes that he may get on any particular night, and just do things that we saw in the Washington game and the San Antonio game later, but earning the trust a little bit earlier in training camp in these early runs for Nick Nurse to actually call on his number to give him an opportunity to play with that second unit a little bit more and some time out there with Joel. Because when we talk about the rebounding, who's going to go out there and crash the glass with Joel Embiid? Ricky Council will go out there and do that, as we talk about the two-handed rebounding quite often, where some of these others may not do that. So that's why I went with Ricky. Gene said Devon loves Ricky Council. Look, I like Ricky Council. The guys can attest for it, even though I wasn't here. And we would talk about Turk and Ricky, and I was big on Ricky. The guys were really big on Turk. And it was really just because of the shooting that Ricky didn't have that they leaned more Turk and I leaned Ricky. But he showed us stuff where it became a fun show bit for us, but more like, no, the guy might be able to actually play a little bit and contribute with these minutes with Embiid, with George, with Maxey as well, and impact games and help you win like he did against San Antonio and Washington, both on the road. That's why I went with Ricky Council there. That's my reasoning. It may not work at all. We may not see that at all. But right now, on July 26th, as we project these lineups and these rotations and all, I could see an opportunity there for him where some of those things factor into it, and he just goes out there and does the Crash Bandicoot Ricky Council stuff and just has at it.
So here's what I would say, and I say this as a compliment. If Reggie Jackson is the backup point guard on this team and Kyle Lowry's role is minimized, Kyle Lowry is not going to be happy. That is not a guy who, even as recently as when he was in Miami, has taken it well when he's been told by a coach or a team, hey, your role's going to be scaled back a bit here. He is not that kind of person.
Even if he's in the rotation, his role better be scaled back.
Listen, all I'm saying is Kyle Lowry is coming back here not to be the Philadelphia mascot, not to be the Udonis Haslem of the Philadelphia 76ers. Kyle Lowry wants to play basketball. And so if Reggie, I don't know Reggie as well as I know Kyle, either locally or just in general. I think from what I have heard, he's a good locker room guy, all that. This is not about guys being good people. It's about having competitors that are similar in that they're smallish backup point guards who are going to be fighting for essentially the same role. I'm very curious to see how it plays out. And I think if one guy manages to win that job outright, there could be some, I wouldn't call it fireworks, but there could be some, let's call them grumbles behind the scenes.
Well,
is that fair to say?
His coach is Nick Nurse. I don't think he has to worry about that because Kyle Lowry is going to have that possible advantage when it comes to those minutes. But no, you're absolutely right. If Kyle Lowry is not playing those backup minutes at that guard spot over Reggie Jackson, I could see that. I could absolutely see that. Yes.
We all silly like the mayor.